My name is Gus. I live in a bus. I travel to take pictures of beautiful people, beautiful places, and I share my experiences with you. So let's go. I'm going to walk to that picnic table over there, right over there, and I'm going to talk to you about boondocking. Now, it seems strange that I would be talking to you about boondocking at a picnic table. I wanted to find a place where I could sit and be in the shade. You could kind of see me and see a beautiful background. Anyway, the video is about boondocking, or off-grid living in a vehicle. I don't know where this term boondocking came from, but it's pretty commonly used for RVers and people living in their vans or motorhomes or in a bus like me. It refers to living off-grid. In other words, for an RVer, somebody that is in a manufactured RV with a toilet system and a plug to plug into shore power, or they call it shore power when you are plugged in at an RV park, and a sewage outlet. So when those things are provided, you're generally in an RV park or maybe on your own slip of land, but now you're living in a connected lifestyle. Whereas if you don't have those things, you're living off-grid or boondocking in a non-connected lifestyle. So I sort of consider myself an expert, although I don't like to think of myself as an expert at anything, because there's always things to learn, and a wise man never thinks he knows everything. Although I sometimes pretend I do, I don't really think I know everything. Off-grid is a better term for me because it means off plug-in, or off and away from these connections. But I'm using boondocking because it's a common and maybe more common term than off-grid when we're talking about vehicles. So, boondocking is living without a connection to power, a connection to sewer, and without a connection to water. So what do you need to boondock? Gee, let me think. You need power. Yeah, you need a water or a water source. And you need to have some way of dealing with your sewage, which, you know, before we had sewer systems, wasn't really a problem. Sewer became a problem when we became a little more civilized and started to live in cities and live close to each other. And the first sewage system was just a ditch outside your home. So you peed and pooed in a bucket and dropped it into the ditch. And eventually it would make it down to the river. And then the river would flow down to the beer making plant. So because we didn't want to make beer out of sewer, somebody invented a much better system, like a toilet and pipes, etc., to maybe a septic tank or a communal holding tank or whatever. And now, if I'm living in the city, if I'm boondocking in a metropolitan area or a city or a town, which might be called urban boondocking, then I will use the sewage systems in like a coffee shop or a gas station or whichever one of those is available. But in an urban environment, I have to look after my own water and my own power. So let's go on to boondocking outside of the city, like in a forest or, you know, some place in the wilderness. What do I need to stay there for a number of days? Well, water, you got to take enough water for the number of days. I consume, if I don't bathe and don't wash my dishes, I will consume 1 gallon of water a day for cooking and drinking. So you got to take enough water for the number of days you go away, or else you'll have to come back or find an alternate water source like a stream or a lake. And you know, wherever you're living, that in Canada, that there are a lot of streams and lakes. In the desert in Arizona, there are not many, so you'll be stuck having to go to town to get some more water. The next most important thing that you probably need is power. You're going to need power At the very least, you're going to need to ensure that the batteries in your vehicle will start your car when you want to leave, or you'll be stuck there. So you need to have a power source or start your motor and with enough regularity so you know that it will start again. That means you would start it, run it, make sure the battery's charged, and you know, you could probably stay out there as long as your water source and food supplies last. So you can use your automobile battery to charge things like, you know, cell phones and stuff like that. You can't use it for a whole lot of stuff, and it's not helping your battery to have a constant draw on it because the starter motor battery is not designed to have constant supply, constant power. So how do you get an alternative source of power? There are things like wind generators. They don't work if there's no wind. And in some places there is always wind, some places there's no wind, but you can't really rely on it because without wind you're going to have zero power. Solar panels will supply you with power, and they generally work even on a cloudy day, but work poorly. They won't necessarily resupply you, but they will always produce power even on a cloudy day. And then there are generators, and generators, as long as the generator starts and runs and you've got gas to run it, may be the most reliable source of power. They're not necessarily the most economic and they're not the most convenient, but generators work. Now you need that power because, like I said, you need to be sure you can get out of the woods. That's the very least. You need to be able to power that battery in your car to get out of the woods 2 weeks from now, if you were staying for 2 weeks. So I have 240 watts of solar panels. Actually a wind generator probably would work, but I've been many places where a wind generator doesn't make sense. So I have solar panels, and they're maintenance free other than to have to wash them. I have to keep them clean so that they produce the most power they can. I've put mine on the side, but I got to that point because I had been using them as portable solar panels, meaning I took them out, put them up, pointed them at the sun, and ensured I got the most power out of each panel. So I have 240 watts, and I have batteries of 80 amp hours, 4 80 amp hour batteries. So I've got 320 amp hours of battery power, which is probably, maybe batteries are the most important aspect of all of these systems. If you hook up your house batteries to the car engine, you can start the car engine, and if you're driving regularly, if you go to a different spot to park every day, you can probably keep those batteries up to date and up to full power just by running your motor and not need solar panels. But I like to sit sometimes for days, so my solar panels will constantly supply power without me doing anything to my batteries. And on really sunny days, they supply a lot of power. On cloudy days, they supply very little. But when they're on the side of my bus, like I was saying before, I started with portable and I could point them towards the sun. Then I realized most of the time I was putting them in a position on the side, like just leaning them against the side of my bus, so they were almost already attached to the side of the bus. So I attached them to the side of the bus. And since that time I realized that I probably get 2 or more times the power out of them because they're on the side than I would if they were on the top. So I survive with 240 watts, and it runs a refrigerator for me with those batteries. The batteries run the refrigerator all night. That's part of the equation that people seldom talk about when they're talking about solar power. If I didn't have that many amp hours in my batteries, I would kill the battery. I mean, my batteries are crappy anyway, but I would completely kill one battery every night for sure. But since I've got the 4 of them, it'll run that fridge, which runs intermittently all night. And next day, of course, I'm going to power them up when I've got some sun. I also buy as little frozen food and very little food that absolutely must be refrigerated, because I'm generally not gone and away from a food source more than 4 or 5 days. But if you wanted to hang out for 2 weeks in the desert, miles and miles and miles from a store, you need to take, if that's 14 days, you need 14 gallons of water at least per person. And if you're going to be washing dishes and, you know, washing your body, having showers, you're going to need a lot more than that. But, you know, as far as solar power goes, a system like mine, 240 watts, will work if it's portable. If it's not a portable or attached to the side of your bus or your vehicle, then you're going to probably need about 500 watts on the roof, 500 or more. But 500 to run a small bar fridge like I do would work if you've got the batteries. So the next question is, what do you do like with sewer? Well, you know, if you watch YouTubers living in a van, they can be living in a city, living in the country, living anywhere. Many of them will pee in a bottle, poo in a plastic bag. There are porta potties like I have, which is a portable toilet. It's got a water tank to flush and a tank to store your waste. And with that, you'd have to simply go to a bathroom, like a park bathroom or something like that, in order to dump that. Or you could go to an RV park and dump it, I suppose. But it only stores a small amount of, a small volume. So you wouldn't want to use it all the time, or you'll be dumping it all the time. Then there are, you know, big RVs. They will have an actual toilet and actual tanks, but you can only go away for as long as, until you filled your tanks. And then we all have to resort to the same things. Maybe a plastic bag in a bucket, tie it up and throw it into a garbage can, or, you know, go hang out under a tree to pee or something, or pee in a water bottle. So, as I said before, being off-grid and or like having a sewage system off-grid is not possible. But you know, that's how we started out as humans, was peeing in the woods. And where does a bear pee? I mean, you know, that's that old joke. So the sewage system is not a problem. The water problem is solved by taking water with you, and the power system is the only thing that you know, seems to be questionable for off-grid. In other words, you know, finding solutions for off-grid. So I try to make these videos simple because, in many respects, these solutions are very simple. When people drove across from the east to the American West in covered wagons, which is my analogy for my bus. It's the same kind of thing, probably even the same size. Maybe I'm bigger. But when they took off every day, they made sure they stocked up with water, because without water, they weren't going to be able to live. If they knew there was a river 20 miles ahead, they wouldn't put so much effort into stocking up, and they wouldn't be conserving it. If they were in a desert, they would be conserving it every little bit, trying to make sure they would never run out. So water was a problem, it was an issue, but it wasn't rocket science. The other thing was, they needed to know where they were going to pee and poo. Well, at that time, they had outhouses. So, if they wanted, they could take a shovel, dig a hole, and then cover it up. But in all likelihood, they just went into the woods and peed and pooed. In an urban environment, you can't do that. But instead of going into the woods, you go into Starbucks or McDonald's or some other place and use their facilities. And if you don't have access to those facilities, you need to have something like a porta potty, a pee bottle, or a plastic bag to poo in. These are all solutions for people who don't have RVs. Now, they didn't need power in terms of electricity because they didn't have iPhones and stuff like that. Now you need power because you need to be able to communicate. And you need to start your motor when you leave the campsite. So you probably need some other way of generating power. That's a generator. You buy a generator, you start it up. As long as it starts up and it's reliable, it'll generate the power you need to support all of your electrical appliances and even supply the emergency power you might need to start your car when you leave the campsite. So they didn't have any trouble with sewer. And when they, of course, I didn't tell you what they did for power. They used kerosene lamps and things like that. So they would take a bucket of kerosene, just like you might carry an extra can of gas or an extra can of fuel. So I don't know how much more simple this can be, but if you're baffled, if these things baffle you, don't leave your backyard. Don't just stay in your home, because these things are, you know, basic. They're very basic. I've been living in my motorhome for 2 years. I've never had a problem. I've never plugged it in. I usually find a washroom. When I don't, I have a porta potty. And I hate emptying that porta potty, so I use it as little as possible. So that's it. That's my story about boondocking. So if you think you've got the ability of the same kind of education and ability as that guy in the 1800s that was crossing the country, then you can probably boondock. In fact, I'm sure you can boondock. You would be the only one that thinks you can't. So boondocking is living off grid. Now, when I was married with children and going camping on the weekend, I did all of this on a small sailboat. But you know, that was actually when my kids were little. We didn't have cell phones. And so I didn't need a battery to charge the cell phone. I did have a battery for my sailboat to run lights, etc. But and that was charged off the motor when I ran the motor. But there were no cell phones. There were no real efficient solar panels at a reasonable price. So power wasn't really a problem. And at that time in the boat I had a porta potty. And in fact I put a porta potty in the Suburban as well. So when we went camping, we went to provincial campsites and camped. But we were self-sufficient. It's a lot easier now. We have solar panels. Generators are cheap. A generator's like 150 bucks. And you know, water comes in bottles. In fact, when I was a kid, even water didn't come in bottles. That might sound kind of funny, but there was no market for water in bottles when I was younger. So even at my age, I know how to live without water bottles. I know how to live without power. But I know people can't do that now. So that's about it. I get a little sarcastic at times. I don't mean to put people down, but I try to put things in perspective. When I was a young man, you couldn't even buy water, except for a high quality super brand called Perrier from France. You couldn't buy solar panels, but you didn't need solar power. You didn't need power for very much because there wasn't much that was electrical in your life that you needed, like a phone. Currently you need to have a phone. We didn't even have a phone when I was camping when I was a young man. So power wasn't really an important issue, but the other one was, where do you pee and poo? Well, you know, that's not been an issue since man began. That's never been an issue. And now, unless you're in a suburban area, that's not a problem. You know what to do. So from my limited amount of time on YouTube and based on the comments I get and the comments I see in Facebook groups and stuff, The hard part about van life, the hard part about getting into van life is getting into it, getting off the couch. That's the hardest part, it seems. Because all that's required to go away for the weekend in a car or a van is a bunch of sandwiches you've got from Subway, a few bottles of water, and a sleeping bag. That's how van life starts. If you want to start it, you do that. Then you figure out what you need, and then come back and pick up what you need for the next trip. And if you want to go for more than a couple of days, buy more sandwiches from Subway and take more water with you. And just make sure you start your car with some regularity so you have a battery when you want to leave. So that's it. I hope you had a good day. Notice the no parking sign. I don't know what it actually says. Oh, it's just no parking anywhere around here. Anyhow, that's a good sign to have behind I'll hide it, but it's a good sign to have behind a van dweller or somebody who's living in their motorhome, because that's the only place you can't park. So I'll leave you with a shot of our cherry blossoms and my bus behind it. If my video has helped you in any way, please subscribe and then hit the bell button, and I'll see you tomorrow.